some white gloves on, but we ain't checking prostates today, honey. Visor doing 3 different colors. Hello everybody, this is Tyler from Tcustoms. Today I'm going to show you what went from this to this. Now for 40 bucks, this blaster honestly comes with quite a bit of stuff. Included is a holster, 2 extra cylinders with a holder and the blaster itself. And it comes with a suppressor that actually adds performance instead of decreasing it. Sounds crazy, right? Well, if you take a look at the Chrono Baler, we can see that Nerf blasters have come a long way. You know, when I started, I mean, the Vulcan barely put out 60, but this thing is going crazy. Back in the day, even PVC custom builds didn't even hit this hard. Wow, look at that, 280 FPS. Well, since these are half darts, I'll have to be cut in half. Thanks, Tangosuka, but that's still pretty good. It still leaves us with a really high FPS of 140, which is honestly a little bit hard for all the games I play. Knowing that I no longer have to improve the power of this blaster, honestly I might have to decrease it. I'm just going to focus on aesthetics, so for this build I'm going to do something a little bit special. But this blaster still has one major flaw, that is the cycling of darts. While it looks and feels awesome, the actual functionality and usability of this blaster is hot garbage. So I began this paint job the way most do. Well, at least all good ones, because if you don't disassemble your blaster before you paint, God help you. I then carefully took out all the internals and kept them so I would not lose them. Huh. Now this blaster comes with a super stiff spring, and honestly I might see if anyone's selling a weaker one, because this perfect seal on the plunger is already doing quite a bit for the performance. Now with all the internals out, I can start prepping for paint. I began to scuff it up with a worn out piece of Scotch Brite, but after realizing that it was doing absolutely nothing, I switched to a piece of 400 grit sandpaper. I use this Krylon gray primer as a primer, followed by their flat black. For this paint job, I wanted to try out one of my favorite techniques I've been using recently on props. It's called the graphite rub. I simply brushed a thin layer of graphite across the entire surface of the blaster, then buffed it with a cotton ball. Which gives one of the most realistic and believable metal effects because, well, it is literally metal on your blaster. I then did the exact same process on the other side. After I sprayed off all the loose dust with some compressed air, I then dry brushed some silver rubber buff in all the corners of the blaster just to highlight them and make it look a lot more like metal. Along with the graphite powder, this makes the blaster look a lot like metal. Okay, now it's time to clear coat. I'm using my favorite brand of clear coat that has never ever failed me. That is the Krylon Flat Clear, which has always worked in the past for graphite rubbed with me. Or is it Rust-Oleum? I don't want to talk about it. Moving on from this tragedy, I used my favorite Citadel paint to paint the blaster. I'll put all the paints and colors in the description in case anyone's interested. Now honestly, for most mods, I don't really have a plan that I'm going in with. I know I wanted this dark elite theme, but I didn't really know what sections I'd start painting. Most times I feel overwhelmed, but when I start, and honestly, it just seems to work out in the end. Well, at least most times. Next, I'll use some masking tape to mask up all the white lines. While my Citadel paint for my white is just completely hardened out, I'll just have to use some cheap and dirty white acrylic paint, which took probably about 5 layers to get decent opacity, and it still has some terrible brush strokes. But since we're going for a battle damaged weather blaster, oh by the way, we're going for a battle damaged weather blaster for this build, the inconsistency in the white will be fine. Now for the lettering, I tried to use a small, well not really small, just the only brush I had right now, to color in all the lettering, but I eventually switched to one of my favorite tools for painting, which is just a long wooden skewer with a point on the end. You could use a toothpick too. While that's drying, I decided to do something special for this blaster. At least for the grip of the hilter. The hilter? What the? The grip of the hilt? But for that, I would need to make the grip smoother than my average user's brain, which is, it's gonna take a while. I began with a bit of sanding with some 100 grit sandpaper. I then broke out my UV curing station, which if you want to check out that video, it's right there? Or it's somewhere on this, it's one of these two sides. I don't know, I should probably have this memorized by now, but no one watched that video anyway, don't check it out. I put some white gloves on, but we ain't checking prostates today, honey. We're dealing with some deadly UV resin, and you don't want to get this stuff on your skin. I then used a piece of foam to apply a thick layer of UV resin across the entirety of the hilt, being sure to fill as many little bumps or divots as possible. I then put on the UV curing hood and activated the UV lights. I then repeated this process a few more times until I was at a point where I built up enough layers where I could start sanding. And sand I did. After sanding as much off as possible, I prepared the surface to apply some Bondo glazing and spot putty. I don't know if I filmed what that looks like. This stuff right here. This is very good stuff. You should definitely buy a lot of this. Sponsored by Bondo, although I wish I was. Now this stuff's great at filling very tiny pinholes, which isn't exactly what we're doing here, but it'll work fine with a few layers. And it's what I got, so it's gonna have to work. After that, I sprayed some filler primer, sanded that down, put some more spot putty, and just repeated that process until it was smooth. Now that it's time for painting, I removed the masking tape and some of the Bondo that kept the grip from closing all the way. Now for the grip, I wanted to do a nice wooden texture to complete the cowboy feel of this blaster. I started mixing up a light brown and started painting it over the surface of the grip. I then added an uneven mixture of dark and light brown to add some more variation in the grip. I was very rough with this, like while it was almost dry. That way it gave some actual texture to the grip. It made it look like wood before I even painted it. Now for the wood grip, I'm using actual wood stain. This gives a really nice effect. So I grabbed some Minwax Espresso stain and carefully applied it to the grip. I was careful to do nice, vertical, consistent strokes, while adding some swirls every once in a while to make it really look like grit. Like wood. Every once in a while I pat some off with a paper towel just to lighten up that layer so I could just add more to give it more depth. And yeah, and honestly, it's really that easy. Now just leave it for a few days to dry and, well, yeah, days. While this technique is easy, it takes forever to dry. Yeah, I'm not kidding. You think this build took one day? I started filming this February 12th, and I'm typing the script right now at April 12th at 1:22 a.m. and I'm reading the script right now from my laptop at 12:51 p.m. April 23rd. So, yeah, things take a while. Now that the paint's dry, I can remove the masking and touch up some of the areas. I then reassembled the blaster and added significantly stronger spring to the rotational mechanism. This should fix it. I then used the little bit of lithium grease I had after a long April and carefully put it along the components that needed it most. Well, some of you may be mad that I'm keeping the trigger lock mechanism on the grip, but I love it because it allows you to spin it like a cowboy and, well, that's honestly really the only reason. At first, Adventure Force Krylon kind of had me worried about these little plastic flips, but they actually are very helpful when doing test assemblies before final assembly, which is something that you should always do. Trust me, I've learned it the hard way. Now it's time for the fun part, the weathering. I used some Winsor and Newton oil paint for the blaster. While this gives very nice, beautiful gradients while weathering, especially for mechanical things like this, if you're on a very tight timeline, this takes at least a few days to dry. It's not quick. Just use acrylic paints if you gotta get it done in a couple days for something. Or like 10 minutes for something, really. But if you have a lot of time, these oil paints are great because you can do it, wait a day, come back and readjust it. Yeah, it's great. Just slap it on and take it off with a paper towel, and yeah, it's really that easy. Put it in places where the blaster would likely see the most amount of dirt and grit get soaked into, or places where you want to accentuate the actual detailing and highlights of the blaster. I then went in with some burnt Sienna just to give a rusty/muddy effect on some parts of the blaster. It really make it pop. Generally, I advise you doing three different colors for weathering, but this time I only did 2. Now that the grip's dried, I applied some gloss clear coat to it. In hindsight, a matte clear probably would have been better for the old weather aesthetic that I was going for, but I don't think gloss looks too terrible. With that dry, I masked off and painted the bottom of the grip. And this got the exact same graphite treatment as the rest of the blaster. I then attached the grip to the blaster and used some black acrylic paint to weather the hilt or the grip. Using the acrylic will give it a really realistic effect because as you grab it, it will slowly rub off in a way that an actual, if it was a real weapon, it would get dirty the exact same way. If you know what I mean. The holster got the same treatment as well, with a little bit of burnt Sienna here and there. And with that, this mod is finished. Now let's just strap on the holster and see how it performs. Well, that sucked. Maybe 3D printing could save the day. I found some 3D printed cylinder things on Thingiverse, so I'm going to print those out and see if that fixed the rotational problems.